Now, any development in economic growth, of course, needs its banking system to work. We have a banker here. How are you contributing to the country's economic growth?
Well, look, I think this is one area where Paraguay can certainly give quite a few lessons to some other countries. We have a banking system here which, after two crises, to put it in very simple, plain words, the authorities decided enough is enough. I mean, we have to run this properly. So they brought in a set of God-honest, old-fashioned banking regulations. So here, we have a tier 1 of about 15–16%. Over in Europe, I think you're hoping to reach 6% sometime in the next few years under this Basel thing that this mess called Basel. We have very simple, plain rules. We don't let our banks take client deposits and speculate in derivatives on Thai bahts versus Japanese yens. That's not called banking. That's called making a bet. And that's you go to the bookies if you want to make a bet, and you don't do it with depositors' money. We have very high solvency ratios. The central bank gives banks a tax break to make a 2% generic provision on their total portfolio on top of required provisions. You tell me a bank in Europe that has 2% provisions. Here, the banks exceed by far the minimum provisions and exceed let's say, the incentive, the carrot given by the regulators to have a very high level of provisioning. So we have extremely high solvency, far superior to anything you'll find in the US or in Europe. And we have yet very high returns on equity. So we don't have to have very little equity to have a high return. In fact, we've got much more equity than the first world, and we still have very decent returns.
You have a fast-growing market. So
we have a fast-growing market. Margins here have not been pared down to 10 basis points, which results in people taking silly decisions. So the authority, the central bank and the regulator have steered this market to a place where it's a sane industry and you don't need to do crazy things to make a reasonable return on your capital. In fact, you can be very prudent and very cautious. In addition to that, the banking market is very liquid. There is lots of money available. With every year of economic growth, there's more acreage gone down under tillage or for cereals, and whoopee, of late the prices of these cereals have been going up, and as farming techniques get better and better, the yields are going up, and this cash keeps coming back every year and gets reinvested into the economy. So we are in a virtuous cycle, and I want to underline the quality and the stability and the reliability of the financial system for two reasons. The first reason is it is not possible to have an economic recovery, let alone an economic, let's say, launching of a sustained growth period, unless you have a very, very solid financial system. That is why you will not be able to have an economic recovery in the United States and in Europe until they deal with the fundamental problem, which is the balance sheet of the banks are still in bad shape. The beauty of here is, for a variety of reasons, we didn't get into that game. We stuck to the old-fashioned stuff, and guess what? It's a wonderful base on which you can collect money and channel it back again into industry and into promotion of the individual through his mortgage or his car to get to work or whatever.
So a fast-growing economy clearly gives a lot of opportunities to banks. Is there a risk of giving consumers too much access to credit, something that they haven't been used to?
We need to learn the lessons, particularly the lessons of the first world and what's happening now in Brazil, in terms of giving out too much consumer credit and at too high rates. I think we need to make sure that we don't have perverse incentives. Remember, it's only 2-3 years ago that Nobel Prizes were being given out to people who invented, credit at 100% per annum, and they were, being given Nobel Prizes. Well, we used to call them moneylenders when I was growing up, usuries. But 3-4 years ago, they were getting Nobel Prizes. Okay, now, suddenly we've realized, well, actually...
So microfinance is a bit of a...
Well, microfinance is just...
difficult topic at the moment. It has been challenging.
When Goldman Sachs is interested in microfinance, it's time to get out. Yeah?
That's Connor's bottom line. Tobias, what did you want to add?
Yes, just to put things in perspective, I think it's good to remember that one of the lessons of the global financial crisis was actually that just at the moment when you think when you start thinking things are perfect, things are regulated well, when you're getting complacent, that's when the real danger set in. And so there is, of course, as in any other country in the world, a risk of becoming too complacent here in Paraguay. It is important to keep in mind that the financial system here has actually grown very fast in the last 5 years. We have seen a process of what you might call financial deepening in the economy from admittedly a very, very low base. But for several years now here, all banking and credit aggregates have consistently grown faster than GDP. So we have seen the share of credit indicators, for example, as part of share of GDP going up, and a very fast credit growth. I think in 2010 we had close to 50% of credit growth, and that's something that always raises question because it implies so much of a structural transformation that you have to consistently adjust and adapt your practices. So upgrading and continuing to improve prudential regulation and banking supervision is an ongoing task, and fortunately one that is being tackled. In particular, as there are still several loopholes and several holes wherein Paraguay's banking regulation is not yet up to the international standards and which need to be fixed. But as, for example, certain ways on how bank capital is defined. But that's a legal question. Yeah, that's a legal question. I think some estimate by the BCP recently came to the conclusion that the system now covers 65 to 70% of Basel I criteria. So there is still some room to go and to improve, and it's important because of the banking system's important contribution to growth and investment. We want this to last. We want it to be sustainable, so it's very important that financial regulation reforms continue at the pace as they have been before. And I guess at some point later we will come to precisely this question, which are the challenges going forward. But I think trying to maintain the stability of the financial system is a very important one. Yeah. It's something that is doable and that is being done, but it has to be taken care of without any doubt.
And Jorge, Connor and I hope other of your bankers appreciate the central bank staff stand on them. What are the focus of the central bank at the moment in helping the banking system growing?
Sure. First of all, we pretty much...
And continue to remain stable, of course.
Of course. We pretty much, fully agree that we learn from the past. We have two major financial crises in the economy. At the early 90s, and then at the beginning of the 2000s. And the crisis was painful, and we learned from that. And from then on, we started to just be more pragmatic, more conservative, and and also our supervisory body has to be comfortable. So what we did is, we put more and more employees in the supervision sector. We train them a lot. We send them whatever place they can be trained for a couple of months, half a year, whatever it takes. But the superintendency has to be really, really strong in order to keep the house in order. That's what we were doing for the past, let's say, 10 years or more. And it's working. I mean, it's working. And what we see for the future is more competition in the system, because people are seeing all over the world, okay, what's the rate of return on assets in Paraguay? 30%.
Yeah.
It's telling you something.
Yeah.
Means there's still enough room to make business.
Okay. Are you receiving more and more requests of information from potential investors?
We do. We do.
Is it a trend going upwards?
It's a trend going upwards, but we are really concerned that we have to be very strong in supervision. So what we are going to do is give more licenses every time we have more trained people and more supervisory body on the ground.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just stop licensing. That's something we learned.
Which seems like a very wise
It's
decision.
quite conservative, but it works. So we're going to keep that trend for the future.
Okay.
Yep.
And of course, the growing banking sector means also that the private sector, the businesses are receiving better and more products. And Agustin, we were talking earlier before starting this event about how you've seen the support of the banking sector to your business in the years.
Yes, as I was mentioning to you before, when I first arrived here, I was somewhat surprised that the company was pre-financing farmers for up to $35 million a year. And we were filling a gap between the banking system because it was difficult to be part of the banking system. Fortunately, and I said fortunately because it wasn't our business, we were doing it in order to help clients. The financial sector covered that gap, and now we don't need to pre-finance anybody. Another thing that I think it has become very important is the AFD, Agencia Financiera de Desarrollo. That has been a critical instrument. And I think when you look at the number of businesses in Paraguay, and you see a lot of pymes, small and medium companies, I think, I'm no expert in the subject, but I think the challenge for the banking system or the financial system is how to address those pymes, how to match their needs with their financial, with their working needs of the banking system. In terms of us, we're privileged. I mean, we have very good relations with several banks, and we are served properly. But definitely something to look into, because there are other important multinational corporations that, as we have commented with Connor, they don't finance themselves 100% in Paraguay. So the need may come, that sometime the system will have to provide more local credit, eventually.